Hey y'all, so today I'm going to show y'all how I make a chicken parmesan, and I'm going to be using my vegan chicken, which I have some of right here. I'm not even going to put it up to the camera because I had to make it a few days ago when I didn't have any tofu, and I was already about halfway through making it before I realized I didn't have any tofu. So it's not perfect, it works, but let me just say, when you're following my recipe, everything I had in there was necessary. I don't know why I even tried to substitute anything. So, that being said, I've got my vegan chicken and I have my marinara that I make from scratch. Both recipes for both of these things are here on my Patreon, so you can kind of make those ahead. And then this part is actually really easy. I wanted to do easy on the cooking so that we could talk about this case, because this case is insane. It's extremely tragic, like the ending is horrible, but the beginning of this is so nuts to me. It's so wild. So let's get into it. First, I'm gonna go ahead and chop up pieces of my vegan chicken to be ready to batter and fry. And here's where I'm gonna show you guys some tips and tricks that I like when I'm frying chicken, especially for this. So I'm going to be chopping up herbs while I'm talking to you about this case. So I've got basil and I have rosemary, both fresh for me. I also have fresh sage and thyme, so I'm going to chop those. But I do have marjoram dried and oregano dried. I do prefer fresh oregano, but we're working with what we've got here today. So I'm going to chop these up and I'll be putting them in my breadcrumbs, which I have here. Now, in addition to breadcrumbs, I also have seasoned flour that's seasoned with a lot of the same Italian seasonings, because you know that we double dredge chicken. So I'm actually going to dredge in flour and breadcrumbs so we get it super crispy and a super good layer of breading around the chicken. So, and I'm also, to make it a little bit crispier, going to add some cornstarch. Some people don't know, but adding a little bit of this to your fry batter will make it crispier. I also have shredded Parmesan and mozzarella already prepared, because nobody likes to watch someone grate cheese for, you know, it takes a minute. Now, another one of the tricks I'm going to show y'all, it's not really a trick, it's just something I don't think a lot of people think about. I season everything from beginning to end. I know I talk a lot about not going overboard with seasoning, but when you're frying things, a lot of the flavor gets lost in the oil as it's frying. Sounds silly, but it's true. Anyone that's tried to fry something can tell you it's true. You might think that your batter is super flavorful, but if that's all you're doing is having a flavorful batter, then you're gonna lose too much of that. So my vegan chicken, if you follow my recipe, it already has a lot of seasoning in the actual concoction, I guess, that goes into making it. So I don't actually marinate this, but if I was making something with shrimp or frying anything else that doesn't have a seasoning already kind of built into it, I'm marinating that. And then with my milk, so I'm using oat milk, and I'm going to go ahead and add it to my bowl. I'm just going to add a little bit. That was a little bit too much. Oat milk is not cheap. So I'm going to do oat milk, and I'm actually going to add a little bit of red wine. I just use a cheap red wine because it's just cooking. And that gives a lot of depth in flavor. Once it cooks into your chicken and into the batter, and then as you'll see, we're putting rosemary in there, and you get a really strong kind of red wine rosemary flavor in the chicken. It's incredible. I'm also, just because I like to have a little bit more bite come through in that, adding a little bit of balsamic vinegar, but not a ton. And that's that for our milk concoction. I'm just going to start chopping herbs and talking to you about Danny LaPlante. Danny LaPlante was 17 in 1986, so that means he was born in 69. So Danny LaPlante was born in 1969. He was 17 years old in 1986. He was 17. He had been breaking into people's houses for a little while. And when he broke into houses, he wasn't necessarily stealing much, especially at first, but he was like rearranging furniture and taking like family pictures and taking batteries to things, light bulbs. I mean, small inconveniences that you notice, and like when you come home, you just feel crazy. You're like, I know this is not how I left my house. But your mind doesn't go straight to, oh my gosh, somebody broke in because nothing's missing. So you just kind of start racking your brain. So he really liked to mess with people's heads like that. So it's suspected that on one of these break-ins is when he located, either in a phone book or written down on someone's notepad, number 2, a young woman that he had a crush on. So her name was Amy Andrews, and he gave her a call. She, like anyone would be, was a little like taken aback by getting a random phone call saying, hey, I think you're cute, and your friend gave me your number, which was not the truth. Nobody had given him her number, just to be clear. And he described himself to her as, you know, a blonde, blue-eyed, jock type guy. Now, Amy, she wasn't necessarily looking to do a whole lot as far as dating at the time, because she had recently lost her mother. So she was going through a lot of grieving, but he was saying sweet things to her, and it was a welcome distraction, I'm willing to bet. So after a lot of talking on the phone, and again, him completely catfishing her in description, because, spoiler, Danny LaPlante is no tall, blonde jock. Danny LaPlante is basically the exact opposite of that. So just picture the exact opposite of that. He had dark hair, he was kind of greasy looking, he was a unkempt teenage boy. So they go, well, he asks her on a date, and over the phone she says yes, and he shows up at her doorstep, of course not looking like how he had described. Catfish before the internet. Well, not before the internet, but you know what I mean. So she still goes on the date with him, which I think is a testament to, like, this girl was a really nice girl, because I'm telling you what right now, I would not have gone. And if that makes me wrong, then fine. But it's really not even about that he was unattractive or less attractive than she was expecting. It's more about the fact that, dude, you just lied to me for months, and I wasn't even really super like keen on the situation anyway, but you lied. So that's a no-go. It's a red flag. End of story, right? Well, this was the 80s, and as we can tell by the mass amounts of like murders and serial killers and just like crazy shit that went on in the really 70s, you know, 80s area, people weren't taking all that extra precaution. So she did go on the date, and the whole time he was just a creep. I mean, he was just a weirdo creep. And as you'll learn through the story, that's who Danny is. He's a weirdo creep. She should have never gave him a chance. And if you're feeling bad for him right now, don't worry, you won't. So he starts asking her about the death of her mom on a first date. Like, dude, shut up. I don't want to talk about my dead mom on a date. But he's asking not just like how it happened or, you know, semi-normal questions when you find out that someone's mother has passed. No, he's asking like creepy ass questions like how much pain were you in when you found out that she had died? How much did y'all cry? And blah blah blah. I mean, this dude was like, I would have left right then and there. But she, again, was trying to be polite and went home and let him know, like, hey, I just don't see us doing a second date. It's not really what's in the cards for us. And she told him it was mostly because she had just lost her mom and wasn't really in that place. Which, again, was nice of her, because I would have straight up told him, like, no, dude, you're ugly, you're a liar, and you're a creep. You're an ugly, lying creep. Why would I want to date you? So, again, Amy and her sister were still very much grieving their mother, who had just passed. So shortly after this first date with Danny, after Amy had told him she was not interested in pursuing anything further, she and her sister decided to have a seance in order to contact their mother, which, I'm sorry, but my heart breaks thinking about being young girls like that. I mean, 16 and 13. And losing your mom and being so like heartbroken about it that you try and do a seance to contact her. I mean, just think of how vulnerable you have to be in that moment. And that's what makes what this asshat does like even worse, because again, like, these are girls that just want to hear from their mom, so they're willing to do a seance, and he takes advantage of that. So, as I'm alluding to, they have this seance, and actually their father catches them and is like, let's not do this. So I'm adding the oregano, I'm adding margarine. Like I said, nothing crazy going on right here. But so their father catches them and is like, all right, let's not do a seance. Let's go to bed. And so they do, and the girls are in their bedroom that they share, and they start hearing a knocking in the walls. But they had just done a seance to contact their dead mother. I'm tossing this, my hands are clean, as yours should be. So they had just done this seance to contact their dead mother. They really aren't, they're not jumping to what's really going on, because what's really going on is just nuts. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have jumped to it either. But they think that their dead mom is trying to contact them. They think they were successful. So they're not really scared in this situation, which I don't think I would be either at that age after doing a seance. I mean, come on. I did, the Bloody Mary and all that stuff, so I think at that age we all have some sort of suspended belief about that. So, they hear this knocking on the walls, and they say, Mom, if that's you, knock twice. Now, it did knock twice. And then they tried that a couple more times, and it worked. So again, being 16 and 13, and you're asking the wall to knock at you if it's your mom, and it does, and you just did a seance, they're pretty confident that it's their mom's ghost. So what happens is they kind of are like communicating with their mom, or so they think, over the next few nights, but then it's starting to get kind of like creepy to them. And they actually, they start telling their dad, like, hey, there's been this like knocking in the walls and all this weird stuff going on, and like at first we thought it was Mom, but now we're not really sure, and we kind of think it's creepy. So the father is still kind of like thinking, okay, these girls need some attention. Alright, so I'm going to get a pan ready, because I'm actually going to bake my chicken instead of frying it. And a lot of it's because I have a lot of fresh herbs and the breadcrumbs and everything. I don't really want them to come off in the fryer, even though they shouldn't too much, but I'd rather just hold on to as much of it as I can. Alright, and then we're going to start dredging. So, as the instructions in my recipe show you, you want to do a little bit of flour and then dredge it, and then we're going to put it in the breadcrumbs. Now, my breadcrumbs are fresh breadcrumbs. I toasted some bread and then blended them. So I'm just hoping that they're toasty enough that they're going to stick right there. It should be okay either way. I'm going to add a little bit of cornstarch to my flour. Just maybe about shy teaspoon. Like I said, it just adds a little bit of crispiness to the skin. So, back we were discussing. So Dad puts the girls in therapy. I mean, this is a great dad. Because again, this is the 80s. A lot of dads in the 80s would have been like, listen, Buttercup, I understand that you lost your mom, but we're gonna need to, I don't know, toughen up. Joe Kennedy sent his daughter to get a fucking lobotomy, so I'm just saying this wasn't the peak of psychological advancement as far as, society. Anyway, so he puts his daughters in therapy, and they keep insisting, like, we're not making this up, we're not crazy. We swear someone is making noises in our wall. He was, leaving things for the girls to find, like notes and stuff, and they weren't nice. It wasn't like, okay, this is our mom anymore. It was like kind of mean stuff and blood and just stuff that freaked the girls out, and they realized that, okay, maybe we summoned a demon. Or I don't know what they were thinking, but generally speaking, they were not excited about what's going on. And they were trying desperately to tell their dad it was not going well. Believe women, y'all, of all ages, come on. We're not insane. Literally, so what happens next? Basically, Dad's at work, and while he's at work, the girls are home alone, and they go down to the basement, and they find more blood, and they find like a threatening note saying that whoever's in their house is going to kill them. So they go running and screaming out of the house, and they go to a neighbor's house, and they are just like freaking out. They're hyperventilating, they're crying, and the neighbor calls their dad, like, listen, someone's in y'all's house or something. And the dad starts, rushing home, and he gets home, and he notices that the blood and the writing on the wall in blood is ketchup. So he goes back to the neighbors, and he tells his daughters, like, y'all are nuts. I don't believe you, no one's in the house. Stop messing with me like this. I just came home from work for this. And the girls saying, like, no, we didn't do that. Please go back to the house. We promise. Well, he does. He goes back to the house, and lo and behold, what does he find? He finds Danny LaPlante in his wife's wedding dress holding a hatchet. I just want to take a second to just imagine that feeling as a father, where your children have been telling you for weeks that this is going on, and you don't believe them, and then you walk into your home to see a teenage boy in your dead wife's wedding dress holding a hatchet. he must have felt real fucking bad at that moment. I'm sorry. So, the girl's father, Mr. Andrews, he goes, well, he struggles with Danny, obviously. He's fighting with Danny. He gets the better of him. He calls the police. The police come, they take Danny away. Now, Danny wasn't a stranger to police. We have a nice coated piece of fake chicken. Anyway, Danny wasn't a stranger to police because he had been doing all those break-ins and stuff. He'd gotten caught once or twice. But basically they chalked it up to him being a weird kid. But as we'll see, that's really not the extent of it. He's a lot more than just a weird kid. So, Danny, he's in juvenile because he's still 17 at this point. So he's actually sitting and waiting to be tried as an adult. Well, they're not saying that, but they're kind of holding on to him at 17 because he was about to turn 18. So, in that meantime, they're checking out what they find in the Andrews house, which is all of these like nooks and crannies in the walls where he had dug out extra crawl spaces. I mean, he wasn't just like in the walls, he had dug through the fountain, like through their house, through the walls of their house, so that he could see Amy from anywhere in the house at all times, no matter what she was doing. Ew. Ah, I just can't imagine. When you hear stuff like that, it makes you start thinking about everything you do when you think you're alone. Like, oh Lord. Oh Lord. So, they are kind of compiling an idea of what was going on here, and they're doing that by looking at, like, there was food in the walls, there was beer, water, change of clothes, like pea cans and stuff like that where he had urinated. So yeah, he'd clearly been there a minute. He'd been living in their walls. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna pause because this is like the part of the case that makes it not fun to talk about, but like so bonkers to me because holy shit, can you imagine if someone was living in your walls? In your walls, like, just, I cannot fathom that. And this poor dad, I mean, he should have just listened to his kids, but I get it. I understand why he didn't. I understand why he was like, okay, my daughters need therapy, because who the fuck lives in walls, you know? Like, that wouldn't have come to his mind. And other than that, what's the other explanation? A ghost? Because he had never caught anyone in the house. So he was being a rational adult who was trying to make the best decision for his kids, but wow. Can you imagine how crappy he probably feels knowing that someone was in his walls and then tried to threaten him with a hatchet? Lord, that's the bonkers part of the story. Now, honestly, from here on, it's just sad, because it gets a lot worse. Obviously, this kid is kind of troubled, and I say obviously because you don't live in someone's walls just because they turned you down. Now, men do a lot of crazy things to women when they turn them down, but that is like next level. So, because I mean, y'all, he lived in their damn walls. So, you can only imagine that Danny probably didn't have the best upbringing. His family wasn't awful, but they weren't, like, his family wasn't unanimously awful. Like, it's not like Charlie Manson, his mom tried to sell him for a pitcher of beer. So, at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, well, duh. And this is not terribly different, but his mom wasn't I didn't see anywhere that she was abusive, but his uncle, I believe, was very abusive, sexually abusive mostly, and of course also physically abusive. So he was brought to a therapist at one point, and this is kind of the worst part to me as far as what Danny went through. Not the worst part in the story, but as far as what Danny went through, this kills me because he did get to go to a therapist. His family did put him in therapy, and the therapist started sexually assaulting him also. So I don't like to say he never had a chance. I don't believe in that. It's not that I don't believe in nature, you know, the nature versus nurture argument. It's not that I don't believe nurture has anything to do with it. I absolutely do. I think it's a mixture of both. But to say he didn't have a chance would be to assume that anyone that goes through that doesn't have a chance of becoming anything less than a psycho. And I don't believe that. I think we do have a chance. It's determined, I think, by how much support you get along the way. And Danny wasn't really given a lot of support. He was kind of like bailed out by his family a lot. They didn't really want him to be the family embarrassment, so instead of letting him be punished and like actually learn a lesson, a lot of times they would just buy his way out of it, or, you know, just take care of the situation in one way or another. They didn't really let Danny get into a lot of trouble publicly because they didn't want to be embarrassed by him. So that is a recipe for disaster. Because when you combine abuse with no consequences being learned, like, obviously, now that's when I'll say, yeah, he didn't have a chance. You don't end up being a good person if nobody's teaching you how to be a good person, and you don't get any consequences for doing bad things, and you're being taught violence and sexual abuse and all this other stuff is normal. So, gonna pop these bad boys in the oven. We're at 365. And then, getting started on everything else, which really is just gonna be preparing spaghetti, talking more about this case, and waiting for our chicken to be ready to put on top of our spaghetti so we can finish the whole meal. Alright, so the police held Danny until he was able to be moved from juvenile. Again, he was turning 18. So he was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of armed assault. I'm trying to think what the 4th would have been for, because it was the 2 daughters and the dad, and of course the kidnapping and the armed assault would be. I really don't know how they got kidnapping. Honestly, I'm trying to think, because at first I was thinking, yeah, that makes sense because he was in their home, but he never really told them that they couldn't leave or anything. But he did have a hatchet, so I mean, it could be argued that had they known that, it's reason to be afraid of him. So I didn't realize this wasn't open. I just had to replenish. But, and I'm going to put just a little bit of olive oil in my water, and I'll do a little bit of salt. Y'all know what a little bit means. Anyway, he was charged with breaking and entering, obviously, and larceny of over $100 and malicious destruction of property. Now, the larceny, I believe, is the clothing, the hatchet, like all that stuff, I believe, was the Andrews. Well, the clothing for sure, that was his wife's. And destruction of property, I mean, he dug throughout their walls. So all of this, like, pretty much run-of-the-mill makes sense. They probably assume that he would deal down. It's probably what the kidnapping charge and those bigger charges are there for, is to get him to negotiate down to something in the middle. He'll probably still do jail time. Common thought process. But when they move him on October 9th, his parents do get the opportunity to then bail him out once those charges are set. And the bail is set at $100,000, to which his parents said, yeah, no problem, and they paid it. So Danny wastes absolutely no time. Once he's been bailed out, he's right back to his old tricks. He breaks into a couple houses, and at one of the houses he steals a gun. At another house he steals some cable boxes. I mean, he's stealing what seems like kind of random stuff, but then he takes, he doesn't steal these, he asks his friend for some bullets, and his friend gives him bullets, and he asks his brother to hold on to some of those things, and his brother does. So, a couple days after that, and y'all, this is when it gets hard. This is the worst part of the story by far, and I will say, trigger warning, anyone with any sort of decency is gonna feel really crappy after hearing about this. This is the worst part. This part sucks. Anyway, so around 3-4 p.m. On October 16th, Danny breaks into the home of the Gustafson family. The Gustafson family, I do not remember the father's name, but his wife's name was Priscilla, and they had 2 children, a son and a daughter. They were 7 and 5, not respectively flipped. So the daughter was 7 and the son was 5. And they were a very happy, loving family by all accounts. And Priscilla was actually pregnant with their 3rd child. Danny breaks into the home while Mr. Gustafson is at work, and he proceeds to sexually assault Priscilla and then murder not only her, but her 2 children. Priscilla was stabbed, the children were drowned, and it was just horrific. And Mr. Gustafson actually was on his way home after finding out about some sort of celebratory event. I think he got a promotion or something, but he said that he was on his way home to get a babysitter and take his wife out for a date night. And he came home to find his pregnant wife and his 2 children murdered. So again, when I said that if y'all were feeling bad for Danny, it wasn't gonna last long, I meant it. This man is I don't even know. I mean, monster, asshole, psycho, all those things don't even begin to cover it, because how the hell do you kill a pregnant woman and her 2 children? What's wrong with you? So, Danny is at home. He actually went back to like his niece's birthday party, where she was about the daughter's age that he had just killed. So that's a whole other level of like psycho, when you can just be that disassociated from what you just did. So he's with his family. Meanwhile, the police are investigating the house. Obviously, they're treating this with as much, attention as they can possibly give it. They're trying to find who would do such a thing. And they find Danny's shirt. And they actually, track it back to Danny fairly easily. They use a dog, tracks back to essentially Danny's house. So Danny, the cops ask for Danny from his parents, and his parents are like, at this point, they're giving him up. They don't care anymore. So they say, yeah, he's here. Danny, like, come on. And Danny's standing out on the porch talking to the cops, and at first it seems like he's kind of cooperating, answering their questions, and suddenly, with no warning, just jumps over the edge of the porch and takes off running. And can you imagine being the cop in that situation? Because like your instinct should be to go chase him, but just imagine like you're standing on a risen porch, a lifted porch, and someone just jumps over the edge. What are you gonna do? Also jump over the edge? No, you have to pause and think, because what the hell just happened? So he gets a little bit of a head start, and he gets going. And well, this part kind of reminds me a little bit of the Andrew Cunanan case, because it seems like he just wreaked havoc on his road trip through trying to escape the police. But we'll get into it in a second. Our pasta is almost al dente, so we're gonna go ahead and get our pan ready. So while Danny's running, his family just gets him up. They don't care anymore. So his brother takes the police to where he kept all this stuff for Danny, and they matched the bullets that he had taken from his friend, or that his friend gave him, and they were able to match the bullets and the striations on the bullets that they found at the crime scene to the stolen gun that was back in his brother's possession. So, meanwhile, Danny is like doing the most, runs and holds a woman at gunpoint and hijacks her for her car. So he's got her in the passenger seat trying to make it down to, I believe, Florida. He was on his way down south somewhere, and the woman eventually sees a police car and decides that she's going to take her chance and jumps out of the car. So that is kind of how the police got a track on where Danny was, and they eventually hunted him down, found him, and charged him with 3 counts of murder. Now, they had plenty on Danny. He really wasn't going to get out of this one, no matter what. There was nothing his parents could do, and even if they wanted to, like I said, they were done bailing him out. On the stand, they asked his mother where he was, and she told them not at home. She gave him up all of his time, place, everything they needed on the stand. Now, in addition to that, as if that wasn't enough, you know, with the bullets, the striation, the stolen gun, his family corroborating the time, all of that would have probably been enough. But they also had Danny's DNA, because Danny is not smart, and he sucks, and he left a bunch of DNA on poor Priscilla before he murdered her. So they were pretty easily able to link Danny to all 4 murders, because again, Priscilla was pregnant. So it didn't really end up very well for Danny. Many people kind of blamed. Now, I personally believe Danny alone is the only one to blame. He is the one who murdered those people. But I do see the town's point when they're upset at his family for bailing him out. Or, again, they can be mad at the system for giving him a bail, but the court system doesn't have really an option to just revoke bail for things that I hate to say aren't serious, because hiding in someone's walls, stalking them, and then meeting them at their home with a hatchet, I can definitely see why some people are like, okay, why did he have bail? He should have just been held. But we have to be really careful, because yeah, screw it. Normally I'm super on the advocate side of things with like trying to not have people in jail, but I can't even play devil's advocate. This guy should have been sitting in prison because he was hiding in their walls and then tried to kill them with a hatchet. And then you let him out and you see what happened. He killed a family of 4. I mean, honestly, well, he killed, I don't even know how to put that. He killed a family of 5 except for the father, if we're counting the baby. So, obviously, yeah, it probably would have been better if he had just not had bail. So yeah, people were pretty upset about this one. He shouldn't have ever had the opportunity to commit these crimes. So, I mean, his family wasn't really well liked after this because, again, they're the ones that bailed him out. If he had been sitting in jail, then Matthew Stockton's family would still be alive. But, again, we really should only place blame on Danny himself. So, while Danny is sitting in jail, sitting in prison, awaiting his sentencing, or awaiting his trial, actually, he starts being pen pals with another inmate, which, just in case you're ever locked up for anything, it's pretty much never a good idea to start talking to other inmates, because a lot of other inmates are looking for deals so that they don't have to sit in prison that long. And guess what? That is actually exactly what happened to Danny. So the guy that he became pen pals with wasn't just like kind of interested in a deal. He literally only reached out to Danny because he had been keeping an eye on like crazy trials going on in the news, or crazy trials that, you know, were in newspapers or whatever. He's keeping an eye out so that he could pretend or, you know, try to get real information on those cases to try and get an easier sentence for himself. This, you know, happens. But Danny is not all the way there in the brain, and he becomes pen pals with this guy. And he pretty much gives a lot away already, like right off the bat, to this guy about his guilt in these charges. So the guy the other inmate, he takes these letters to the prosecutor and says, hey, I want a deal. I have all of this from Danny LaPlante, and it could really help your case. And I also volunteer to continue having conversations with Danny to continue helping your case. And that's exactly what happened. The prosecutor agreed, and they exchanged tons of letters, many of which Danny pretty much openly admits his guilt. I mean, seriously, this guy, there was no question about it. And they had it all in these letters. But Danny's defense attorney did what any good defense attorney in that situation would do, so I'm not holding anything against him. And he tried to get those letters dismissed because that inmate was acting as an agent of the state without letting Danny know. But that meant that they could still use the letters from before he became an agent of the state. So before he took the original letters to the prosecutor, those letters are fine because he wasn't an acting agent of the state. So, or I don't even know if that's the correct term, I'm not thinking straight, but you know what I mean. That was before he had gone and started cooperating. So those letters are free game. Again, just to go back to what we've got. The dogs went all the way back to his house. His family gave him up. They found the bullets. They matched the striations to the stolen gun. And they had now DNA and a confession in these letters. Danny was sentenced to life in prison, and that's where he is. Now, on several occasions, Danny has tried to appeal this decision, and for various reasons, obviously has not been granted an appeal. Hopefully Danny rots in prison for the rest of his life, and it's terrible, and he has a really bad time. Now, finishing up this dish, I'm going to go ahead and put my marinara on the noodles. And I'm just going to make sure it's spread pretty evenly across all the noodles. And I've got a bay leaf in here that I'm going to pick out real quick. Alright, and then basically, I'm just going to put the chicken on top. I'll probably add a dabble more of marinara because I've got another jar in the fridge. And then cover it in cheese and pop it in the oven again. Not for too long, but just long enough to get that cheese coating nice and brown like everyone likes it. Okay, so our chicken is nicely browned. The crust, so I'm just going to put it right on top. Alright, I'll show you. Bam! So good. And then I'm just going to do, like I said, another dollop of sauce right here in the middle. Get on a little bit of Ollie's. I'm going to call them my chicken breasts, but we all know it's seitan and jackfruit and what should have been tofu. Alright, so now I'm going to take my pre-shredded cheese, but remember y'all, fresh cheese is always the way to go. It just doesn't taste good out of a bag. I mean, not that it doesn't taste good. All cheese tastes good. But it doesn't melt right. That's really, honestly, the brass tacks of it. It just doesn't melt right. So just take the extra time. Grate you some fresh cheese. Now I am just like loading mine down with cheese. I don't think I realized how much cheese I grated, but that's fine because I love cheese. Cheese is why I could never be an actual vegan. Just make a couple vegan recipes here and there. Or in this case, vegetarian. Alright. So I'm going to pop this back in the oven, and then we're pretty much done. Alright y'all, and we just took our finished product out of the oven. So as you can see, it's nice and brown on the top. Still simmering. We've got a nice brown breading on the chicken. So you can't tell me that don't look good. I think that could change a carnivore's mind. But y'all try it and let me know. And thank you for subscribing to my Patreon. See you next time.